me ask you a question. If someone followed you around and spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, would you call it encouragement or abuse? See, most people have no idea how much their life is being limited by their lips, not what they're saying to others, what they're saying to themselves. You talk to you more than anyone else does. You hear your voice more than any sermon, any motivational video, any mentor. And the problem is, most people are letting their inner dialogue be an echo of fear, failure, and frustration. Let me ask you something. Who do you think is the most influential person in your life? For most people, their first thoughts are parents, mentors, teachers, or even enemies. But none of those individuals have as much power over your decisions, emotions, and identity as the one person who talks to you the most. You. Your inner voice is constantly narrating your life. It's interpreting events, assigning meaning to experiences, and deciding what's possible or impossible. And whether you realize it or not, it's directing your outer life. The way you speak to yourself in your mind is directly responsible for how you behave, how you perform, and how you handle setbacks. It governs because you will never act higher than how you talk to yourself internally. A person can have all the opportunity in the world, but if they speak to themselves in limitation, they'll self-sabotage every time. They'll shrink back from doors that are wide open because they've already convinced themselves they're not worthy to walk through. On the other hand, someone with less skill, fewer resources, and smaller support systems can rise to the top simply because they believe they belong there, and that belief was shaped by their self-talk. This is why your inner voice must be trained like a personal coach, not a cruel critic. If your inner voice constantly tells you, you're not good enough, you're going to fail, or you always mess it up, your results will reflect that prophecy. You'll procrastinate not because you're lazy, but because deep down, you don't think what you do really matters. You'll avoid risk not because you're cautious, but because you've trained your mind to equate failure with finality. You'll say no to opportunities not because you're wise, but because your inner voice is telling you that success belongs to other people, not you. But if you can shift that inner voice, if you can teach yourself to talk like a leader, like a visionary, like someone who knows their value, your life will begin to move in the direction of that voice. You'll take action faster, not because everything is guaranteed to work out, but because your self-talk is grounded in possibility instead of fear. You'll be able to stand in front of pressure and not fold, because the voice in your head is louder than the chaos around you. And even when life hits you hard, you'll bounce back quicker because your inner dialogue isn't rehearsing disaster, it's rehearsing resilience. Understand this. The mind is always listening to your mouth. What you say to yourself doesn't just stay in your head. It becomes the framework for your decisions. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you're disorganized, guess what? You'll stop even trying to plan because you've already accepted that identity. If you tell yourself you're not creative, you'll overlook your best ideas without even testing them. But when you start speaking to yourself in alignment with the person you're becoming, instead of the person you've been, you trigger something powerful. You start shifting from doubt to discipline, from defeat to drive, from survival mode to strategic mode. The person who changes how they talk to themselves can change how they see themselves, and the person who changes how they see themselves will always change how they show up in the world. This is why speaking to yourself like a champion, even when you feel like a failure, is not delusion, it's development. You're not lying to yourself, you're leading yourself. You're giving your spirit instructions before your circumstances have even changed. You're telling your emotions where to go instead of letting them run the show. Because if you let your default voice run wild, it'll recycle every fear, every wound, and every insecurity you've ever collected. But if you intentionally interrupt that default setting with declarations of who you truly are, your identity, your value, your purpose, you begin to reroute the entire system from dysfunction to destiny. And it doesn't take months to start seeing results. The shift begins the moment you decide that your inner dialogue will no longer be a weapon against you, but a weapon for you. When you make that decision, you stop walking around like a slave to your old story and start stepping like the architect of your future. You no longer wait for validation because your voice is the validation. You don't beg for encouragement because you've learned to supply it. You don't fear rejection because your voice reminds you that rejection isn't the end, it's a redirection. And that kind of voice builds a different kind of life. Words don't just describe reality, they create it. Every sentence you speak to yourself is shaping the blueprint of who you believe you are. The language you use becomes the architecture of your self-image. If you constantly tell yourself you're not good at something, your brain accepts it as truth and begins building patterns of avoidance and fear around it. But when you intentionally shift your language, when you begin speaking about yourself with clarity, conviction, and vision, you aren't just making noise, you're making identity. Identity isn't discovered. You don't stumble into a strong self picture. You speak yourself into one over and over until your inner narrative is no longer built from what others said about you, but from what you've said to yourself by design. The problem is most people never update their identity because they never update their vocabulary. They continue to describe themselves based on past pain instead of future purpose. They keep saying things like, I've always been shy, or I'm just not a people person, or I'm not built for that kind of success. And those phrases become invisible chains that lock them into small living. You'll never rise above the way you routinely describe yourself. If your language is casual, weak, and passive, your life will follow that path. But when your language becomes intentional, empowering, and future-focused, something incredible begins to happen. You start acting like the version of you've been speaking about. Speaking isn't just communication, it's transformation. The words you speak to yourself are either expanding your capacity or shrinking it. Think about it. When you say, I'm overwhelmed, what happens? Your body tenses, your mind races, and your creativity shuts down. But when you say, I have the capacity to handle this, you create space for strength to show up. When you say, I'm tired of this, you trigger frustration. But when you say, I'm learning from this, you trigger growth. The difference is just a few words, but those words carry a different energy, a different frequency, a different assignment. That's why you must learn to speak to yourself like a creator, not just a consumer of life. A creator chooses words that align with intention and outcomes, not feelings and fears. A creator speaks solutions while others complain about problems. A creator uses language to shift the atmosphere internally before it ever shifts externally. And here's what's even more powerful. When you change the way you speak to yourself, you also change what you allow others to speak over you. Your internal dialogue sets the tone for what you tolerate in your external environment. If your own words are full of value, vision, and dignity, you'll never entertain voices that try to diminish your worth. You'll stop seeking permission to be powerful because you've already given it to yourself. You'll no longer crave validation because you've internalized your own voice of affirmation. And you'll notice something else. Your relationships, your decisions, your opportunities, they'll all start aligning with the version of you've been speaking about in secret. This is why identity is not about what happened to you. It's about what you consistently say about yourself. You could have gone through failure, but if you say, I'm still chosen, I'm still equipped, I'm still growing, you don't take on the identity of the failure, you take on the identity of a person who learns, adapts, and overcomes. You could have been rejected, but if you say, I am loved, I am favored, I am on assignment, rejection won't define you. It will refine you. Your words are your first line of defense against mediocrity. Your declarations are your daily reminders of who you truly are and where you're going. Every phrase is either rehearsing defeat or reinforcing destiny. And when you begin to speak to yourself with the language of power, authority, love, clarity, and vision, your subconscious starts rewriting the entire internal script. And when the internal script changes, your behaviors change, your habits align, your goals crystallize, your confidence deepens. Because you're no longer echoing fear, you're establishing identity. You're no longer rehearsing limitation, you're rehearsing leadership. You're not begging for change, you're becoming the change through the words you repeatedly speak over yourself until they become the truth you live from. Self-talk is a seed, and just like a seed, it carries the future inside of it. What you plant in your mind through your words will eventually grow into your beliefs, and those beliefs will determine your behaviors. The reason so many people remain stuck is not because of a lack of talent or opportunity, but because they keep planting the wrong seeds with their mouth. They say things like, "I'm always late. I never get things right. I'm not as smart as others." And they think those are harmless expressions of how they feel in the moment. But feelings are temporary while words take root. Over time, those seeds grow into limiting beliefs, and limiting beliefs form invisible walls that keep a person operating below their potential. You can't consistently speak limitation and live in expansion. You can't plant negativity and expect to harvest confidence. Everything you say to yourself is either reinforcing who you've been or establishing who you're becoming. The moment you open your mouth, you're programming your internal environment. And you cannot afford to be careless with that kind of power. Seeds don't care whether you believe in the process or not. If you plant it and water it, it's going to grow. The same principle applies to your thoughts and words. If you constantly water thoughts of inadequacy with more words of self-doubt, don't be surprised when fear becomes your default reaction to life. But if you begin to speak words of strength, purpose, and clarity, even when you don't feel them yet, you're planting new patterns that your brain and spirit will eventually grow into. Your words are not just describing your situation, they are deciding your direction. Every time you speak to yourself, you're either setting a course for power or for passivity. When you say, "I can't do this," your mind shuts down. It stops looking for solutions. It accepts that failure is inevitable. But if you replace that with, "I haven't mastered this yet, but I will," your mind begins working for you. It starts scanning for strategies, pulling in past wins, and unlocking new levels of creativity. The right words don't just sound good, they activate something. They spark movement, they create momentum. And momentum, once started, is hard to stop. The danger is when people underestimate the power of what they say when they're alone. They think, "It doesn't matter what I say to myself, I'm just venting." But venting negative speech is like opening your mouth and scattering weeds across your own garden. It might feel good for a moment, but it destroys the growth you're trying to build. You can't afford to say things to yourself that contradict your goals. You can't afford to label yourself with anything less than greatness. Every time you say, "This is just who I am," you better make sure that who you are aligns with where you're going. Because if it doesn't, you're giving your future away for free to an identity that doesn't serve you. This is why 24 hours of disciplined self-talk can begin to shift everything. When you commit to speaking to yourself with purpose, even for a short period of time, you start replacing old seeds with new ones. You start starving the weeds of self-sabotage and feeding the roots of self-mastery. And the beautiful part is, this doesn't require anyone else to believe in you. This doesn't take approval, applause, or affirmation from outside sources. The moment you take control of your internal speech, you become your own source of strength. You become the gardener of your mind. You decide what gets planted, what gets pulled out, and what gets pruned. That kind of discipline creates a new reality. You stop waiting for confidence and start cultivating it. You stop looking for external proof and start speaking internal truth. And when your mouth lines up with your mission, your entire life starts moving in that direction. Because the seeds you've planted through your speech will grow into habits, and those habits will eventually build a future that matches what you spoke long before anyone else could see it. Emotions are powerful, but they are also followers. They follow focus, they follow beliefs, and most importantly, they follow language. What you say to yourself creates an emotional state, and that emotional state determines how you show up in the world. If you speak fear, you feel fear. If you speak faith, you feel faith. The words that come out of your mouth don't just reflect how you feel, they direct how you feel. That's why people who learn to speak with power often appear more confident, more grounded, more in control. It's not because they never feel doubt or discouragement. It's because they've trained themselves to speak in a way that elevates their emotions instead of allowing their emotions to dictate the conversation. There is a direct connection between the declarations you make and the emotional states you live in. If you wake up and the first thing you say is, "I'm exhausted," "This day is going to be hard," or "I don't want to deal with any of this," you are activating emotions that match those statements. Your body begins to feel heavier, your mind begins to anticipate problems, and your energy begins to drop. You haven't even stepped outside your house yet, and your language has already weakened your posture and your perspective. On the other hand, if you wake up and say, "Today I show up with strength, I handle what comes with wisdom, I carry peace and power," your emotions begin to rise to meet the words you just spoke. It's not magic, it's not hype, it's wiring. Your brain is always listening, always responding to the signals you send with your language. The more you speak empowering words, the more your nervous system gets used to operating from confidence instead of confusion. The more you speak peace, the more your body relaxes. Your heart rate steadies and your stress levels decrease. Science is catching up to what wisdom has always known. Your words are not just vibrations in the air, they are signals to the soul. And for every emotional state you want to experience, joy, strength, hope, gratitude, there is a language that invites that emotion in and gives it permission to stay. The truth is, you can change your emotional climate just by changing your vocabulary. When something goes wrong and you say, "This always happens to me," you reinforce helplessness. But when you say, "This is a setup for something greater," you trigger hope. When you say, "I can't believe I messed this up," you create guilt. But when you say, "I'm learning faster every time," you produce motivation. The same situation can lead to different emotions depending on what you say about it. That's why language is a tool, and those who master the tool get to master their state. They no longer live on the emotional roller coaster of circumstance because they've built the habit of speaking in a way that stabilizes their soul. And don't underestimate the impact of your inner dialogue during moments of pressure. High-pressure environments are where most people lose emotional control. But the difference between those who stay composed and those who fall apart isn't found in talent or background. It's found in self-talk. Champions talk to themselves differently in the middle of the chaos. They say, "I'm built for this," even when things look uncertain. They say, "I've prepared for this moment," even if they feel nervous. That language creates calm in the middle of the storm. It centers the mind, fuels the body, and focuses the spirit. And when your emotions follow that kind of direction, they become allies instead of enemies. Learning to direct your emotions through your words is a daily practice. You don't need perfect circumstances to feel powerful. You need intentional language. You need phrases that reinforce identity, affirm value, and declare purpose. You need sentences ready for when fear tries to rise, for when discouragement knocks, for when doubt creeps in. When you have those words on standby, your emotions no longer get the final say. Your emotions begin to work for you because your voice has taken its rightful place as the authority in your inner world. And as your voice commands your emotions, your presence begins to change. You become the kind of person who walks into a room with clarity, who leads conversations with peace, who faces setbacks with strength. Not because you never feel the weight, but because you've trained your words to carry that weight with power. There's a principle most people ignore when it comes to transformation. Repetition is more powerful than inspiration. You can be inspired by a single moment, a powerful quote, or an emotional event, but transformation only happens when you hear something so consistently that it becomes a part of you. That's why the way you speak to yourself must not only be intentional, it must be repeated. Not once, not occasionally, but constantly. You can't say something positive to yourself once and expect it to undo years of negative programming. Your self-talk is a script, and every day you have the power to edit it, revise it, and rehearse it until it becomes your default. Repetition creates rhythm, and rhythm creates results. If you listen to any successful person long enough, you'll notice a pattern. They repeat affirmations, declarations, and statements of belief with discipline. They're not hoping the words work. They know the words are working on them. They speak not because they feel it in the moment, but because they want to feel it consistently. Most people wait to feel strong before they speak strong. But that's backward. You speak strong so that you can feel strong. You declare peace before you feel peace. You affirm purpose before you see the full picture. Because the act of repetition builds a foundation that can support your future. It programs your identity through practice, not perfection. The truth is, we're all rehearsing something. Some are rehearsing doubt. Some are rehearsing bitterness. Some are rehearsing insecurity. They've gotten so used to saying the same self-limiting things over and over that it feels normal. I never get it right. People like me don't succeed. I don't belong in that room. Those phrases don't show up randomly. They're the result of rehearsed defeat. The good news is, just like you rehearse those, you can rehearse something new. You can rehearse confidence. You can rehearse excellence. You can rehearse leadership. You can rehearse greatness. It's not about faking it. It's about forming it. Forming a new identity with your words before your circumstances even reflect it. This is the power of consistency in self-talk. Your brain begins to believe whatever it hears the most. If you keep saying, I am focused, I am growing, I am favored, your subconscious starts filtering your reality through those lenses. You notice opportunities you used to overlook. You take actions you used to delay. You carry yourself with a posture that matches your declarations, and eventually you stop needing external reminders because your internal script is already aligned. This doesn't mean you won't have setbacks. It means setbacks no longer shake your sense of self. Because your identity isn't based on how your day goes, it's based on what you've been declaring all along. It's also important to understand that repetition rewires your reaction. When challenges come, most people default to panic, doubt, or avoidance. But if you've trained yourself through repeated self-talk, your reaction changes. Instead of saying, why is this happening to me? You say, this is stretching me for something greater. Instead of, I can't handle this, you say, I was built for this. Instead of, nothing's working, you say, everything is preparing me. These aren't just phrases. They're preloaded responses that create power in the pressure. Because in the moment of stress, you won't rise to the level of your feelings, you'll rise to the level of your training. And your self-talk is your training ground. Repetition also builds resilience. The more you say something to yourself, the more it becomes rooted. And the deeper it's rooted, the harder it is for circumstances to pull it up. That's why you need to speak life, even on the days it feels dry. Speak purpose, even when the path looks unclear. Speak confidence, even when fear tries to echo in your mind. The more you speak it, the more your spirit holds on to it. And eventually, you'll reach a place where your words no longer feel like effort, they feel like your essence. They're no longer something you do to feel better, they're something you are because you've spoken them into your identity, your posture, your habits, your future. What you tolerate in your self-talk sets the standard for what you tolerate in your life. The way you speak to yourself either opens doors or closes them. It either sharpens your vision or blinds you to what's possible. Many people unknowingly sabotage their potential by allowing low-level language to live rent-free in their mind. They say things like, I'm just surviving, I'm trying to make it, or I guess this is as good as it gets. These aren't harmless phrases. They're silent agreements with limitation. Every time you say something that contradicts your purpose, you lower your standard, and over time, your life begins to shrink to fit the shape of your speech. This is why it's so important to treat your inner dialogue as sacred. You can't allow just anything to come out of your mouth and expect your life to still move forward in power. You have to audit your language with the same intensity that you would protect your home. You wouldn't leave the doors of your house wide open for anything to walk in. So why do you leave the gates of your mind open to negativity, doubt, and fear-filled speech? The words you speak to yourself are either invitations or evictions. They invite purpose, power, and peace, or they evict clarity, confidence, and courage. When you begin to speak with precision, you begin to live with intention. And when you live with intention, you start making decisions that match your destiny instead of your discouragement. Most people underestimate how much authority their voice holds over their direction. They think their life is being shaped by what others say about them, but the truth is, the most powerful voice in your life is your own. What you repeatedly say about your money, your health, your relationships, your potential, those statements form a belief system. That belief system becomes your internal compass. And that compass will always lead you to actions and outcomes that align with your dominant declaration. So if you keep saying, I'm bad with money, you'll behave in ways that sabotage wealth. If you keep saying, I always attract the wrong people, you'll overlook good relationships because you're expecting bad ones. If you keep saying, I can't change, you'll never take steps that lead to transformation. But when you raise your language, you raise your life. You start speaking in ways that reflect your future instead of your fears. You start describing your life the way it can be, not the way it has been. You stop using words that keep you comfortable and start using words that make you grow. Instead of I can't, you say I'm learning. Instead of it's too hard, you say this is building me. Instead of I'm stuck, you say I'm strategizing. These are not semantics, these are shifts. Shifts in focus, shifts in power, shifts in mindset. And once those shifts take root in your language, they begin to bear fruit in your results. You don't need perfect conditions to raise your language. You just need a decision. A decision to no longer give your voice to weakness. A decision to align your words with who you're becoming. A decision to stop normalizing struggle and start verbalizing solutions. Because as long as you speak like a victim, you'll keep living like one. But when you begin to speak like a visionary, your life starts moving in the direction of vision. Your speech becomes a blueprint for better. It becomes a map for breakthrough. And most importantly, it becomes a declaration of authority over your future. Because no one else gets to narrate your life story unless you give them the pen. And your pen is your mouth. So speak what empowers you. Speak what reminds you. Speak what stretches you. Speak what commands your environment to align with your assignment, and do it so consistently that it no longer feels like self-talk, it feels like self-truth. Because when your words are rooted in identity, anchored in purpose, and aimed at destiny, you begin to move through life with a different level of clarity, resilience, and inner power. Here's a powerful and fitting conclusion in the style of Myron Golden, tying together all 6 keynote themes under the title, Speak to Yourself Like This for Just 24 Hours, Educational, Transformational, and Straight to the Soul. If you would dare to speak to yourself like this for just 24 hours, you'd be shocked at what begins to change. Because transformation isn't something that starts on the outside and works its way in. It starts with what you whisper when no one's listening. It starts with what you say to yourself when no one's watching. The language you allow in your mind becomes the blueprint your life builds from. You're not waiting for the world to shift. You're waiting for your words to align with the future that's been calling you all along. Start planting seeds of strength instead of weakness. Train your mouth to declare truth even when your feelings don't line up. Let your declarations guide your emotions, not the other way around. Make repetition your strategy, not just motivation your moment. Speak like someone who knows that your words carry weight, because they do. You are not powerless. You are a speaking spirit, and your words create, shape, shift, and command. It's not about pretending things are perfect. It's about prophesying who you are becoming. It's about choosing to no longer speak death over your destiny. It's about refusing to let casual language cancel divine purpose. This is the line in the sand. The moment you decide that your voice no longer bows to fear, insecurity, or the echoes of past failure, your voice rises. Your words align. Your identity awakens and your future starts unfolding one intentional declaration at a time.